To the sunny side of freedom. Today we have a very special guest and friend. We have Scooter in the house. Hi, Scoot.
Hello, how are you today?
Good. Happy Thursday to you.
And to you.
I'm so happy that you're here today. I know that you and I have talked for quite some time. We've actually known each other for about a year and a half. We met on the TikTok platform. And for some time, you and I have not only talked and met each other in person at a recent veteran meetup, but you've also participated in our veteran conversations on Friday nights, which is our Veteran Live. And I was hoping to take this opportunity to kind of get you to speak a little bit on your own personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Year and a half ago, things were kind of upside down in my life. Um, I had pretty much just come away from trying to move to a new location, into a better home. We didn't have power and water, and so that was a big struggle for me. Um, it pushed me mentally probably to about the farthest I've ever been pushed. Um, and then I met you on the app. Unfortunately, that occurred just a few months after my eldest grandson had passed in a motor vehicle accident. Um, and not only on a personal level were you there and I was able to talk to you, but the Veteran Live, I've met a lot of people who now I have daily interaction with.
Mhm.
Um, and it really is just a place that we can come and support one another. Um, for the most part, I believe that we have really good conversations. Sometimes it gets pretty deep. Um, but that's to be expected. I mean, you've provided a place for a whole lot of people to come that some of us never really were in the civilian world as adults. Um, and that's been a new one for me to kind of look back. Everyone talks about what it's like to reintegrate. Um, and I actually think it was on one of your lives, and then we discussed it's not even a reintegration. When you go from being, a young, well, what, 18 to 21, and you're in the service, and then you're there for your adult life, you're learning when you come out something brand new. And so having the ability to talk to people who've been in different branches, different times of service, it has really helped to kind of say, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not doing this on my own.
And that's a message we repeat quite frequently, never alone. But what does that truly mean, right? Um, because even though we can be surrounded on a live platform with a bunch of people, it requires more than just seeing a bunch of people gathered. It requires that engagement, that support. And then, as you mentioned, those day to day interactions, which is something that I saw start to happen with all of you, our veteran community, which I just thought was amazing. We often, hear and see people say, you got to check on your friends, check on your friends, do your check ins every week. And I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, just it's a handful of us that have this specific way of communicating with each other on a daily, like, hey, good morning, have a great day. We know where people are based on what we've established thus far, which is like that text messaging system or phone calls. But the platform and how it started for me anyway, and how you all got to know me, going back to what you were saying, the civilian world, and oh my God, a civilian is running a veterans live. I mean, how did that make you feel, or what did you think when you first heard that? Like, yeah, okay.
um, Honestly, for me, I didn't put a lot of stock into you being a civilian. Um, I just saw you as someone who was very passionate, and your positivity was very engaging, and it drew you closer. Um, so I didn't think a whole lot on the fact that you were a civilian. I think potentially there was not even potentially. I know there was some reservation just because that's been almost beat into us. Be a little bit reserved.
Yeah.
Um, when you start opening up and talking in an atmosphere that is primarily veteran centric,
Hmm.
the conversation is different. It really is.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that was the one thing that took a little bit of time. Now, I'll joke with you about all kinds of. I actually think it's funny we teach you as many sayings as possible, and either convert or corrupt. You can look at it either way.
Yeah.
Into kind of how those conversations go for us. I will say that one of the things that made it easier for me was very early on, you had talked about your father's service. Um, and regardless of where the service was, um, you had an understanding. So to me, I think that was kind of a lifeline for me. But then the more we talked, the more we communicated, the more I understood that this was something that your heart was drawn to. And I'm more than willing to support people who are honest and forthcoming and give that space.
Yeah. And Scoot, I often say this. You don't wake up one day and just say, I'm going to have a brilliant idea and I'm going to just say, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
kind of happened. And the best description, especially when I'm talking to people, any person in particular, I'm like, it was kind of just called to my heart, but it didn't happen in like one day. It took me a little bit to watch and observe what was happening, especially on the social media platform. It was very in the early stages, it was either civilians who were gathering or veterans that were gathering. And you had a few veterans that were gathering in with the civilians, but the conversations were very different. They were
Mhm.
either very politically driven, and I was like, something has to change here. We're not having like we can't just base our entire life on politics, the conversations, right? There's so much more to us as individuals. And that's when I was like, our veterans need us. And that was one of the very first emotional moments I think I had. I was like, if I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling as an American,
Mhm.
I can't imagine what our veterans are feeling because they served this country. And that's really what drove my decision initially to I need to run a veterans live. And it was kind of like I need to check on them and see how they're doing and gain understanding. How are they doing? Um, in doing so, a lot of the same people followed me. So some of the civilians, and initially it was very repetitive in the sense that I would say, "Join us. It's here for you guys to gain perspective. We're going to learn. How else will we ever understand?" Too often we hear civilian friends say, well, we don't know how to communicate with our veterans, or it's family members who are having that break in communication, right? There's failure in marriages, it's children not knowing how to speak to a mother or a father or a sibling. So initially, that was the reasoning. It was like, I need to see how they're doing because I felt heartbroken for so much of what was happening in our country. And again, this isn't a political interview, but really going to facts, fact based, and what had initially happened in Afghanistan upset so many Americans, but I also know how upset our veterans were, anyone in military, and just wanting to really make sure that they were okay and that they had a place to come to, that they felt safe to talk.
Mhm.
Um, which brings us to the next part, which is, you know, whether it was easy or hard for you, for instance, to come in and engage.
Yeah. So that is a little bit different. Coming into your live on Fridays was easier than starting to engage in the live. Um, and I think part of that is it had been about 13 years, 14 years that I had been out. Um, and so I had learned through self-preservation uh, that you don't speak about these
Yeah.
things. You don't talk about what would be considered normal if I was having a conversation. Let's just use Chief. I talked to him after a 12-year break, and that first phone call was like no time had passed, and we went right into conversations that literally we'd had sitting in the desert
Mhm.
in 2010, 2011. Um, so that's a natural flow. But then when you come in with people who you don't know that intimately, it is a little bit different. And I think all of those years of being cautious in what I said in a public setting, even what I said around my family, who my kids grew up with me in the service. My wife dealt with multiple deployments. Um, but I learned even from them, even with that little bit of understanding, there were certain conversations. One sticks out in my mind the most. Um, and the kids were all in the living room, and them and mom were talking, and I was just kind of sitting there, and they had become adults. Most of them now had a baby of their own somewhere. And it was, oh, my back, oh, when I was at work the other day, my shoulder. And I thought, I'm just going to throw out. So I was on the firing line. It was a training scenario, but I ended up, one of the students shot a concrete wall. Well, the shrapnel from that and the concrete stitched up my left side. So I just said, yeah, I get it. The first time I ended up with shrapnel in my chest, boy, that sure hurt. Silence. No one spoke. Every single one of the kids got up and went outside in their own little group. They didn't do it on purpose, but I felt so bad at that moment because I had just disrupted this family conversation. And after that, I never spoke really about why I had aches and pains. In fact, I would rarely speak about the aches and pains.
Mhm.
Um, Two broken backs, and I just don't speak about it. Um, so it is difficult. And your platform provided a space that once I got past that and understood, I was back with brothers and sisters who understood, and you who were empathetic and non-judgmental with anything that we had talked about. It was easier, more comfortable. And I think that helped me come out of my shell. Then I started getting messages from others that I never thought for in a million years they would hear what I was saying. I just thought I was having conversation.
Mhm.
Um, and I would get messages, "Hey, thanks for saying that. I didn't think anyone else felt that way." And it's something as simple as this one will stand out to me too. I don't sleep. I was asked that by Chief, and when I answered him, I said, "Oh, well, prior to taking gummies, um, they had me on Ambien, and prior to that, I just didn't sleep, and the Ambien would knock me out in a way that I didn't feel good when I woke up in the morning." Someone across the country heard me say, "I don't sleep,"
Mhm.
and said, "Wow, that's what hooked me," because that was my answer, but I didn't think anybody else had it.
Yeah.
So now that's how your platform has started to expand out, and people are hearing, and now they're coming in, and these conversations can happen, and we don't have to keep it bottled up.
Yeah. I think oftentimes too, even though you guys know I'm there, you guys are just so happy to be with each other. I think that's one of the things that I get to observe. I'm like, hey guys, I'm here. But you guys do an amazing job of seeing me too. I see you guys. But that did take time. And I think for each of you who came in, it took, and I won't make reference to any names specifically, but there were certain veterans that stayed in the comments section for months
Mhm.
until they got comfortable enough to get in a box. And then I would tease them like, now I can't get them to mute, you know, because you develop like this is a safe space.
Mhm.
It is a judgment free zone because no one person is perfect and everybody's got a story and it's okay to share it. And what better place than share it with your brothers and sisters? For you guys, that was like perfect. And I've always made it where this isn't about rank. When do you ever hear rank? We don't do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's just be yourself. What's going on? How are you doing? Until it's just kind of like normal now for us to actually talk about feelings. Like, how you doing? You know, it's not abnormal.
That is still so very fresh. As soon as you said it, I got goosebumps a little bit because you're right. And I'm just now in the last few months. You've heard me say it more than I probably have my entire life. I was raised um, a lot in my grandparents' home. My mom, as you well know, is a very busy nurse.
Yep.
Um, and it was just us for quite a while, and then she remarried, but I didn't made that connection with my grandparents, so I spent most of my time at our family ranch. So I grew up in an environment that the father figure was from, that boomer, or is it boomer? No, the greatest generation. Um, and we didn't do a whole lot of the whole talk about your feelings
What are
thing. Like,
those?
yeah. And then I went from there to the service where day one, feelings and emotions were frowned upon, and they let you know very upfront they were frowned upon. So now I tell people feelings are a new thing to me. I mean, a lot of people laugh at that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the truth. To tell someone I feel this way is still a little bit foreign, but I force myself to lean into that so that it becomes more comfortable. Hey, I
Hmm.
do have feelings. I can show some emotions. Um, I still think emotions tend to override. I mean, I don't know if that'll ever completely go away. And in the world stage, I think emotions and feelings have become too important, and
Hmm.
so decisions are being made on that. And I don't think that's the way you should do it. But I'm always grateful to you and the platform and those there who've expressed the fact that it's okay to have feelings. Um, while we're on that, one of the other things is letting people know that you do love them.
Yeah.
That has taken on a whole new meaning for me. Um, and I see that growing in our smaller group that we have going. um, but to tell your brothers and sisters, "Hey, I do love you,"
Yeah.
it's impactful, and when I hear it, I feel better. So, yeah, it's been a learning experience, and you've been kind of the guide to a lot of that.
Yeah. Miss Positivity.
Yeah.
In the beginning, like, what do you want? How do you wake up? I used to get a lot of questions like that. I'm like, no, I don't wake up positive all the time. It's work. I have to work at it. And you had said something that's now escaped me, but you were making reference to feelings. It is okay, whether they're good or bad, because it's
Mhm.
part of being human. Being human is actually being able to say, I'm having a really lousy day, or I'm having an exceptionally great day, you know?
You're right, but it really is more difficult than what most people think. You and I had a conversation. I haven't gotten a chance to tell you this part yet, but we talk about things start when you're a service member before you ever even hit boot camp.
Hmm.
I happen to be the town leader, I guess, that flew out from our airport. So I had everyone's orders in a backpack, and I carried those. We landed in Chicago. I went to Great Lakes for boot camp with the Navy. So we landed in Chicago, got off the plane, and there were some petty officers there that told us all to sit on the ground, spread our knees open, and scooch up. And that's how we had to sit for the first couple hours while all these different planes were coming in, different groups were landing. And you weren't to talk, you weren't to have an emotion on your face. If you smiled, they would see it and come and yell at you for
Yeah.
smiling. And then you're to get on the bus. When you were on the bus, you were to remain quiet. When you got off the bus, there was a table that was set up, and there was a young petty officer sitting there, said, "Give me your orders." I picked my bag up and I set it on the table. I had three people in an instant there screaming at me that it's not my table. How dare I bleepity bleep 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 anything on their table. So I had to take the backpack, hold it open, and try to fumble around and get everybody's orders out. That was the experience, and that was prior to ever actually
Yeah.
setting foot in boot camp, and it just progressed from there. So, yeah, it starts right from the get-go, and it's that breakdown process, and then when they build you back up, they build you up the way that they
Mhm.
want you. And I understand it. I'm not discounting it. What I am saying is we do need to have more when you transition back the other way, instead of, well, thank you, here's your paperwork. Maybe you have a retirement ceremony, maybe you don't, and you just get in the car and drive away one
Yeah.
day. The next morning you wake up and your uniforms are all still hanging in the closet and you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You are at a loss. You go to the store and you don't feel like you can function with those people in the store. And pretty soon that just does start to wear on you. And at least that was my experience. And I think the culmination of losing it before I wanted to, um, the injuries I sustained, the impact they're still having to this day, um, it became overbearing at one
Yeah.
point. And one of the things that you put out the most, and I'm going to kind of segue us a little bit, because I was that guy that had the handgun on the table, and my family was gone. My wife and granddaughter were gone, and the thought was
Yeah.
there. It was, I can just end this, but I was worried about them. Who's going to bring in the firewood? Who's going to go get water? Wait a minute. Now they got to clean up this mess. They don't need to see that. I don't talk about my experiences because I didn't want them to have that in their mind. And so I was able to pull back. But we as a society need to do better
Absolutely.
for our warriors who are transitioning back to civilian life, or as I mentioned in the beginning, never knew civilian life, but are now entering it for the first time. We need to be
Mhm.
there so we don't have the 22 a day, which we do know is much
Yep.
bigger. Yep. It's a much bigger number. They don't take into account the uh oh, now I've lost it. The behaviors. You've heard a lot of our
Yep.
stories, and yeah, we might laugh, but drinking and driving, how foolish was that? Take away the drinking, but looking for that next adrenaline rush. How fast can I go down the
Yeah.
highway? Um, you name it, we will find destructive
Yep.
activities, and that doesn't get discussed or talked about.
Right. You
So,
brought up so many points, and you actually brought back what. No,
sorry.
you're okay. So you actually brought back what I wanted to bring up, which was where it starts. One of the things that I have found myself doing with all of your help in my own learning is listen to understand and then provide that education into our societies. And one of the messages that I have tried to provide on my platform for civilians, military families, when they're struggling to understand, they're struggling to understand, well, why doesn't dad talk to me? Why doesn't my husband talk to me? I can't get him to talk to me. There's no emotion. The same things that you just mentioned are the reasons why. And I've taken it a step further to say, well, imagine this. And too often we have to paint pictures for people for them to actually understand. And I say, imagine being at the age of 18. You sign up, you're this excited young individual, either male or female. You can't wait to go serve your country for whatever reason, whether mom served, dad served, grandpa served, but you're excited. And the very first experience you have is of individuals, an organization, right, stripping you of your identity. And this is how I break it down for civilians, because this is how I learned it to understand it. And I thought to myself, my God, if somebody literally stripped me of my identity, what are you smiling at? You would never smile again, because with that comes that stress, and there is trauma there as well, because it's a nervous reaction, it's anxiety, all of it, all of it. So when I've had these conversations, for instance, on my live, I think it puts things into perspective. Like, now you take all of that, now you're a new person, and this is who you had to be in order to go serve our country, whether in another country, whatever the case may be, whether it was combat, non-combat, the same applied to all. They had to go through this training.
Right.
In some probably more aggressive based on branch, I don't know. But then you're like, okay, you're done. Your time is up. Now go back into society, find a job. You come back, your family's ecstatic. I also think, from what I've learned from all of you, you're all excited also to see your family. But at the same time, no one ever takes into consideration that you're also kind of grieving. It's a grieving process.
Hmm.
It's a grieving process because you've just now let go of a family that you've known has had your right, left, back, front, you has your six all the time. You don't have to worry
Hmm.
about that, and understands you. And you come back into society, that's gone. Your title's kind of gone, even though you carry it with you, but it kind of becomes no one can see it because you're out of uniform. So you're walking around trying to find your purpose, trying to find your identity. And these are just based on conversations I've had with all of you, what I've learned as a civilian. And I put myself in those shoes and say, oh my God, I would feel completely lost. And then you have family who can't understand you, can't empathize, can't sympathize, and are probably harping on you at the same time. Like, you need to do this and you need to do that, or you're not in service anymore. Why are you taking that tone with the kids? Right. So, all of the stories you've all shared with me, I'm honored to be able to be a voice and share them back out, because I do believe that others, when I break it down for them in such a way, they're like, oh my God, I never thought of that. Never thought of
Mhm.
that. I said, yeah, go ahead.
I, I have referenced you as a translator before, in conversations with people, because if I or anyone else references our experience, the audience receives the information in a totally different fashion because they're looking at you as the
Yeah.
veteran. And whether it's with an admiration, a disdain, even those that want to learn, the mind, they see the veteran. Whereas when you do it, they see their peer, right? So when you talk about it and you can say, well, I have examples that number in double, triple digits that are common throughout, because you hit one thing in very specifically. Yes, each branch as you go through boot camp is a little different. Some are more extreme than others. But at the end of the day one, hour one, minute one is pretty similar for everybody. And that is the very start of that breakdown process. Um, then when you start going further into, yeah, boot camp, but then depending on the job you take after
Yep.
boot camp, you may end up at schools, advanced schools, and then end up with your unit itself. That changes everything entirely. And yeah, you still do carry part of who I am is that expeditionary warfare armor. I can strip them down, build them, whatever it might be. I'm also a coxswain. I ran, patrol boats. That's part of who I am. But unless you've been there, even other branches, which they ask
Yeah.
the question because they know to, but most people have no idea what that is, how it translates, what it meant. Um, a- a- and being able to have those discussions again, and it makes me very happy when you are interested and learn it, and then I'll hear it live a month later and you'll take something that you were part of a conversation and bring it out, but you've brought it out in a way that people can understand it from
Mhm.
you where they would never hear it from
Well,
me.
thank you for that. And the other piece, too, when we talk about PTSD, for instance, I'll be quite honest with you. When we, as a civilian, someone who's never served or gone through the boot camp process, whether it's 13 weeks, is it?
It depends on what branch you're
Whether
in.
it's 11 or 13 weeks, and you think about so much of that, we don't even know half of it. We just have like, we don't even know half of it. And all I could say to you, my friend, is that in itself would give me a diagnosis of PTSD, because it's a
Mhm.
form of trauma. When you're stripped of who you are as a person, how you identify. And I'm not saying that you don't regain a new identity, and you do. And it's an identity that you're proud of, right? You served our country.
Mhm.
Um, but with that comes a lot of sacrifice. You lose
Yeah.
yourself when we talk about losing feeling, and you guys have all heard me say this. As long as you're feeling, you're alive. And I want these words, whoever's listening, as long as you're feeling, you feel alive. When you stop feeling,
Yeah.
you don't feel alive. Nothing can grow from a place without feeling. What can grow from there? And that's any emotion other than,
And you're absolutely right. So now take that, and this is how feelings were described, at least for my generation. So I enlisted back in the mid '90s and went clear up until I just looked at my paperwork again. I don't know why, but for some reason in my brain I had 2012. No, it was 2013. I'm like, well, that explains a lot. But anyway, um, it was, if you're in pain, then you know you're alive.
mm,
Pain is what lets you know. you're alive. Pain is the weakness that's leaving your body. Everything reverted back to
Mm.
pain. Embrace the suck. You're going to continue to be in pain. Imagine, because you talk about these experiences, and I do want to address the fact because I see the toxicity, especially within the veteran culture. Well, are you a combat veteran or a
Right.
non-combat veteran?
What's the level of your
Well,
pain in order to be, yeah.
yeah, yeah, legitimately, I remember a Master Chief. I'll just say it, Master Chief Manning. What a phenomenal man! It was an honor to serve with him. But he explained it really well, and he said, "Are you hurt or are you
Mhm.
injured? Because this is how we're going to decide what the next step is. If you're hurt, we'll give you maybe a moment to process that, then get the hell back to what you
Yeah.
were doing. If you're injured, we'll pull you, but you're going directly to sick bay, and they're going to determine your future from there." And most of us never wanted that because you stood the potential, especially within the unit that I ended with, that could sidetrack or sideline the rest of your career within that community. You might go do something else, but you'll never be a part of that community again. Um, so that's how we judge
Yeah.
things.
And Scoot, there's a part of that too, because you hear, I mean, you see what I do. Part of my daily planks in bringing awareness at 22 is also about, come on, let's go. We got to embrace the suck. But I don't start there. I
Mhm.
start with, okay, I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to listen to you. And now it's time to embrace the suck. Dust yourself off. We're going to get up. Whereas in your description, there's not even that part, which is I'll sit with you, talk to me about how you feel, and that's the difference. Um, and that's part of the motivation and I don't know, I call it inspiring others. Come on, you're not alone. I want you to understand that we are here. We'll listen. Does everyone know how to listen? No, no, it's hard. It's hard to listen. We're quick to respond. I too am guilty of this. Is something I'm working on, even with my own children. Like, why do I have to interject all the time? I don't know. We don't listen. It's actually hard to just sit still and listen, and it's something you have to practice doing, like anything else. But Scooter, I appreciate you greatly, not just for your service, and I thank you for that, and all of you that I've had the pleasure of getting to know. Because honestly, I'm honored. I feel honored. Honestly, I do. I feel honored to know all of you, and then that I call you my friends. I don't just get to call you my friends because we've spent so many hours on the platform on our veterans' lives, but we actually met in
We
person.
did.
We did in the month of October at our second Sunny Side of Freedom meetup. You were part of that, and I wanted to hear a little bit from you on that.
So that was the second one. I wanted to make the first one. It just didn't pan out for me. Um, it was a push, not just from myself, but even from my family's perspective of you need to go. And that was a big push here in my home. And of course I was getting a lot of calls of, hey, you need to come, I'm going to be there, let's do this. And I went with excitement, and then I was blown away by what it was, which it's so hard to even put
Mhm.
into the words. And what was even more for me, so it happened right over my birthday, right?
Yeah,
So you guys surprised me, and I had no idea that was coming. um but the camaraderie again, and what I most enjoyed was you had your loose agenda, and I love that. You are so good at picking up how this group of people were feeling, that you may have had something planned for, say, at 10 o'clock, we're going to go down to the beach and check out the lighthouses, which we all thought was a fantastic idea.
mhm.
But at breakfast, for whatever reason, we all got into some big conversation or joke fest, which is what most of that was. And it was so lighthearted and fun. I don't think
Yeah,
we made the beach until like 1:30 in the afternoon, but it didn't throw you off. You rolled with it without saying really a word to anyone, and you let us show you more what we needed. There was still the structure of, meals you know, hey, let's do this, but you gave the options. You had, again, I love it, the loose structure. So there was things to do, but if we were in the midst of just having a good time, that's what we did. And I
Yeah.
thought that was the best part. That took such a load off, and I felt so revived after that was done. One, it felt like it went way too fast. I couldn't believe it. It felt like it was just done so quick. I'm really looking forward to the next one. Um, the food, oh my lord. We've talked about that it needs to it needs to, maybe get catered at some point so that you don't have as much work. My only request would be is that you sit down with the caterer and test their stuff because it has to meet your standard before it's going to meet. I mean,
Yeah.
we were all ready for hot dogs and cereal the entire time we were there. And I think we told you that numerous times. Like, we'd have been happy with a hot dog and cereal. Like, we're good. The food was phenomenal. The company was great. The activities that you put together flowed in such a manner that it never ever felt like we were rushed or this was somehow um clinical. It was very natural. I
Yeah.
loved it. I can't speak highly enough of it.
I loved, and I always make reference to I get a front row seat and it's pretty freaking awesome. Some will ask, well, what do you guys do? And I don't think they fully understand that if we did no activity at all, the fact that I can actually look and say, I gathered veterans and they laughed and they shared their stories, that in itself is more than anything else. Those are added bonuses, whether there's a hike, whether there's a little field trip. Those are
Mhm.
added bonuses and experiences. But the actual meetup itself is just being able to unite all of you and give you back some of that feeling because you all feel like home, or that's what you've told me, and I see it for myself. It's like instantaneous. I'm like, look at them, they're all happy. I get so excited, you know? It excites
Mhm.
my heart a lot because you're all smiling and you're happy and it's not forced. It's not like, okay, here's your partner, you got to sit there. It's just chillax. And I won't take full credit for it because you guys are phenomenal. Who's gathering firewood? Who's watching the fire? Yes, we tease each other. And even the cooking. You guys took turns on the grill or bringing food out. So I won't take full credit for it. And I was asked, Sonny, I never expected this. Even on the first meetup, I'm like, well, the way I look at it, or at least the way I was raised, food speaks to our heart. That's how I look at it.
Mhm.
And maybe for some, it's been a while since they've had an actual meal that was prepared, not just something out of a
Mhm.
box or instant fix or a McDonald's. And that's the least that I can do. And when some ask me personally, well, are you a veteran? No, but it's my time to serve. And that's how I see it. I do see it that way. And I try
Mhm.
to communicate this message as often as I can to other civilians. And if not me, then who? Join me, I
Right.
think for us civilians, it's been really hard. There hasn't been enough education, communication, awareness. I didn't know what 22 stood. That's on this side. I didn't know what 22 stood for before I started running veterans lives. So I make it a mission now to make sure that well, there are some veterans who don't know what 22 means, but civilians specifically to ask me without judgment. It's okay. We're going to talk about it. Do you understand the gravity of these numbers and that they actually stand for much more than just 22? So, back to our meetups, just what an honor to be able to, I feel like you guys chose me, you know, you chose me, you see me, you trust me, you're my friends, you're very protective of me, all of you. You're very protective of me. I do feel like I gained a lot of brothers and sisters. And many can't understand that unless they take the time to understand it, which brings me to the next piece, which is breaking stigmas. The stigmas associated with our veteran community. And I can tell you firsthand, I'm sick of it. I want to bust that box. I want to break it open, not just for our civilian side, but also our veteran side, because they're both participating in that. Whether it's our veteran community who keep themselves in that box, or our civilians who feel like, well, there's nothing we can do. whatever the
Mhm.
case may be, the bridge that I started to, when I first started, I said, I need to bridge the gap. And everyone was like, yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. You do that. And I did it. It's no longer can I do it, it's we've done it. We did it with our veteran lives. We've done it with our meetups. We'll continue to push forward. Um, but it's the awareness that we're bringing that, look, if I can do it, you can do it. And more needs to be done within our society, within our communities. We are losing lives, you know?
And that's what I like about how you say bridging the gap, because I was actually going to talk about that as well. So we're right on track.
Okay.
Um, within the veteran community, um, not going to say a reason why, because I think everyone has their own reason, but within our community, the acceptance of a civilian coming in and trying to break down those walls is next to impossible. It takes from the inside trying to break down those walls. But what you've done is given us something to point to. Look at what she's doing. Look at the things that she's doing. Look at how it's working. Um, it's okay. We can have conversation. You and I've talked about this. Will there always be that little bit that stays either with the individual or strictly within the veteran circle? Absolutely. It
Mhm.
just will. And that's okay. But I think that's part of what we have to express out is that there still is going to be that little bit that just it's I don't want to say it's inappropriate conversation. Um, but that is kind of what it boils down to. Is it's probably inappropriate to have some of the conversations about things that happen downrange, overseas, whatever. Eh, But that's okay, right? For the most part, we do need to break down the wall a little bit. We shouldn't be putting out that, well, we're just a bunch of knuckle dragging, angry, broken, which I identified myself as that many a time. Old grumpy veteran,
Yep.
broken, all of those things. And it took a while, but I finally figured out that just different.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I'm different. My life experiences were different. My reaction to uh-oh, the water went out or the electricity went out is a way different experience than for someone who hasn't maybe had the same experiences I've had. To
Yeah.
me, those are like, well, and another cliche, well, no one died, there's not a real threat. Are we uncomfortable? Sure, but that's okay. We can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But learning that for someone else that's not the case, and that's where you say like you're giving that information to civilians and pointing our direction and saying, see, this is what I've experienced. Well, the same goes when I talk about my experience interacting with a civilian group, which is, but look at how this has gone.
Mhm.
Look at how well this has worked. um so I appreciate that. I kind of veered a little bit. I don't know where my mind went.
That's
That
okay.
was
It's okay because we could talk forever because we're friends too. But I think for some, oh, she's a civilian, she's a female. The majority are males. Like, what is she doing? They out of concern, they're concerned for me. I'm like, you don't even
Mhm.
know. I've never felt safer, you know? And actually, at our last meetup, there was that running joke. There was some social media memes going around. I'm like, about the beer. I feel safer in the forest with the beer.
The bear, yeah, yep.
Do you remember? And I was like, no, I feel safer right here. And again, you can't explain it to somebody who's already painted a picture or perception. Again, we learn to listen. We learn from listening, and gaining perspective means you actually make the effort, and the effort has to be there. But to make an association with a group of individuals, in this case, we're making reference to our veteran community, is just to me ridiculous, because I know
Yeah.
plenty of individuals that are either I've met narcissists, I've
Mhm.
seen abuse, things of that nature, and I'm like, and they didn't serve, so okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Um, So, and those are some of the stigmas and things that we have to break in society. And when we're talking about stigmas, as you know, recently, 420 Chief and myself, we started the nonprofit Break Stigmas. And we're super excited to see where that takes us in the year of 2025 and the amazing things we're going to be able to do, events and so forth, because more needs to be done within our communities, individually
Mhm.
and then as a whole. Um, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. We're silencing the most important, to me anyway. I'm like, where would we be without veterans? We forget the sacrifices. Not all of us,
Right.
you know?
Right. And I see. So, and I know break stigmas has been a conversation and something that's been talked about for a while now moving forward. And it feels like the universe just kind of aligned
Yeah,
to kick us off here in January of 2025. I know it's not even that I know that the platform of break stigmas is going to grow exponentially this year. We
yeah,
have a lot of great people who believe in it. We all have the ability to converse about it. And I
yep,
think that it truly bridges that gap that you have talked about because with break stigmas, and I won't go too far because I don't know what all we're going,
I'm actually going
but
to touch
with
on it.
okay, so but you have the sunny side of freedom. We have 420 Chief. Um, both of those form up into break stigmas. From that, we've got the support that comes from you listed the primary stigmas that we talked about. But we have people now who are coming in that have firsthand knowledge of many of them. And so we can have this nice conversation and work towards breaking those down
Yeah,
and giving an opportunity. Yeah, I'm very veteran centric, you know that. Um, but I hope my experience and my conversations will take the cannabis issue. I feel like my life has become so much more full and whole since
hmm,
I was able to start working away from a lot of the
yeah,
pharmaceuticals. The VA is phenomenal at saying, "Oh, you have that? Here's a pill."
yeah. Well, that's
And
as a whole, as a society, I think we're just pharma driven. It's not just the VA, just for that purpose. But Scooter, and for those watching, please visit www.breakstigmas.com. Get familiarized with our mission. It's the Sunny Side of Freedom and 420 Chief have come together and collaborating and bringing together break stigmas. There are several stigmas here that we focus on when it comes to bridging the gap with our veteran community and our civilian friends and understanding PTSD, 22 a day, bridging the gap. Veterans' lives matter, and plant medicine. And when we make reference, I know Scooter just briefly touched base on it. It's understanding that there are holistic approaches to care, not just pharma driven care, which many stories have been shared by our veteran community. And that's for another episode because there's so many stories and we could be here all night. But honestly, just based on what I've learned as an individual, I do believe is leading to the 22 a day in conjunction with, of course, things that are, choices we've also made individually. We always have personal accountability, of course,
mhm,
whether it be the drinking. And Scooter, we won't necessarily get into that right now, but because I think you'll be back. I would love to
yep,
have you back. To further discuss some of these things and how it's improved your mental health, which is another stigma. We can't talk about mental health, which means feelings and things of that nature. It's okay to not be okay. Um, but you get familiarized with that mission, whether you're reaching out to myself or 420 Chief, would be more than happy, more than happy. And if there are any sponsors out there who would like to learn more, please reach out to us. And Scooter, I have a lot of respect for you, not just as one of our veterans, but of course as my friend. You've been amazing, and I appreciate how you're always ready So gotcha. I got you, to support and help in anything that may very well help me and the Sunny Side of Freedom mission and getting the messages out there. You're not just supporting me, you're also supporting your brothers and your sisters because you're stepping forward and leading, which is something I always make reference to. Lead the way. Lead in love and lead the way for others, and that's what it is. It's telling veterans it's okay. You could step forward. We're leading the way for one another and opening up opportunities for conversation. Um, and I'm just so super grateful that we are where we are a year and a half later. I'm excited to have a third meetup. I don't even know where it's at right now just yet, but more to come on that. Um, and I'd love to have you back because there are different things that I'd like to discuss with you. Sorry about that. Just dropped my phone. There are other things that I like to obviously dive into with you,
Hmm.
just to obviously give everyone an understanding. It's that perspective that we need to take time to learn and understand when we're talking to our veterans, and recognizing that everyone has a different story. Your story is not going to be the same as 420 Chiefs or our other friends that join us. And we need to stop just making this one generalized association. Well, all veterans. No, wrong.
Right. Yep. We are still individuals, maybe not as individual as someone who's never experienced it. We all have a similar path and journey that we can talk about,
Yeah.
but we are still individuals. Just real quickly at the end, I will say that you talk about PTSD. I've got PTSD, service connected. No, it didn't come from any of my time in a combat theater.
Yeah.
It literally came from a humanitarian mission in early 2005 to the Indian Ocean and flying into Sumatra. Um, that affected me way more than anything I ever saw in Kuwait, Iraq, UAE, Africa. Um, and it just, it's something that we do need to be able to have that conversation and say, not all PTSD comes from a combat related
Right.
incident.
Right. Exactly. And guys, civilians have PTSD too. Trauma is
Yep.
trauma. It's that simple. Trauma is trauma. I often make reference in my mind when I try to understand, the levels of specific things or how people see information. I'm like, that's kind of like saying to someone who's identified as, abuse, for instance, when we talk about
Hmm.
abuse. Well, abuse comes in many forms. You don't need to have physical abuse to say you've been abused, right? Domestic violence is domestic violence. There's a cycle, there's a circle of domestic violence. It just depends where you fall. And the same goes for PTSD. But we don't take that away from somebody because it doesn't fall here. And that's kind
Right.
of something I've also learned within the veteran community. Those questions that pop, well, was it combat? Does it have to be combat in order to have trauma or PTSD or any of those things? So there's a lot that I think that we'll be discussing come forward,
Mhm.
because education is important. More we share, the better in our communities and society. But for today, any closing thoughts for you?
Just ready for the next meetup.
I'm ready for the next meetup too. So with that, we'll close this out. Like I always say, stay sunny, stay spicy, always make it count, lead in love and lead the way for others. We're all going home one day, but not today. 22 a day, too many. We are here to support each other, uplift each other, and be a support system. I appreciate you and I love you, my friend. And I thank you for your time today. We will definitely would love to have you back here. I know I would. So I will be in touch with you. And for those of you listening, if you have any questions, please feel free. Leave comments down below. Send me a message. Say, Sunny, I'd love to be on the show. I'd love to tell my story or speak specifically on something. And I'm sure Scooter would welcome any questions as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, my friend. Well, with that, I say have a good night. And I thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. Much appreciated. Lead in love.